Imagine living in a place hailed as the cradle of civilization and realizing it's more of a death trap than a paradise. Mesopotamia, the land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Historians often paint it as humanity's glorious starting point. The first cities, the first writing, the first laws. Progress, right? But beneath the surface of those ancient mud brick walls was a reality far grimmer than the textbooks would ever dare admit. This was not a golden age for the common man, or even the wealthy. It was a brutal, grinding existence where survival was a daily gamble. Let's start in the heart of it all, the cities. The great cities of Mesopotamia, Ur, Uruk, Lagash, Babylon, were nothing like the romantic ruins tourists snap photos of today. These cities were packed, stinking cauldrons of disease and despair. There was no sewage system. Waste rotted openly in the streets, mixing with the stagnant water of the rivers that were supposed to be lifelines but quickly turned into cesspools. Fresh water? Almost a myth. Contamination led to rampant outbreaks of cholera-like diseases. Homes, if you could call them that, were tiny, poorly ventilated mud huts, damp in winter, suffocating in summer. Forget about windows. Forget about sunlight. These were ovens of filth and darkness. And if you think today's fire hazards are bad, imagine a city made entirely of dried mud, straw, and wood. A single misplaced spark could reduce an entire neighborhood to ashes overnight. No fire brigades, no escape routes. Living conditions were so dire that disease wasn't just common, it was a way of life. People lived shoulder to shoulder with goats, chickens, vermin, and the invisible, deadly plagues they carried. And this was considered the high point of civilization. But it gets worse, because even if you managed to survive the filth and flames, there was something even deadlier lurking. The very laws meant to protect you. What kind of laws? You might wish you didn't know. In Mesopotamia, the law wasn't just written. It was carved into stone, towering over the people like a constant, silent threat. The Code of Hammurabi. The very sight of it must have been intimidating. Towering slabs etched with neat rows of cuneiform, promising order, protection, civilization. But if you lived under it, the truth was far grimmer. Imagine being a farmer, your hands calloused and cracked from years in the fields. One bad harvest, not because you were lazy, but because the rains never came. And you could be dragged in front of a judge, accused of failing your duty. Punishment? Not a fine, not a warning. They'd cut off your nose. Children were no safer. In Mesopotamia, if a son struck his father even once, even in defense, the law was merciless. His hands would be chopped off. No trial, no appeal. Just the swift execution of justice. And the weight of the law wasn't equal. It leaned heavily, crushing the poor and shielding the wealthy. If a noble harmed a commoner, it could be settled with silver. But if a commoner even insulted a noble, death. The hierarchy wasn't just enforced, it was weaponized. For women, the law was a double-edged sword. Accusations alone were deadly. A wife suspected, not proven, just suspected, of infidelity could be tied and drowned in the Euphrates. No evidence needed. Her life could end on a whisper. And slaves? They weren't people in the eyes of the law. They were property, no different than a clay pot or a herd of goats. Their deaths didn't even warrant a punishment, only a financial fine for the damage done. Justice, it turned out, wasn't about fairness or peace. It was about control. It was about ensuring that everyone, from the lowest farmer to the highest merchant, stayed exactly where they were, terrified to step out of line. Yet even the harshest laws couldn't protect you from everything. In a place where the gods were feared more than kings, there was a darker, deeper force that ruled every life. A force so unpredictable that no law could shield you from its wrath. Life in ancient Mesopotamia wasn't just a battle against disease, drought, or brutal laws. No, there was something even more relentless. Something you couldn't see, couldn't predict, couldn't fight. The gods. To the people of Mesopotamia, the gods weren't kind, loving figures. They were terrifying, angry, unforgiving. Every thunderstorm, every flood, every withered crop was seen as a sign of their displeasure. It didn't matter how pious you were. One slip, one missed ritual, and disaster could strike. Imagine waking up every day believing that invisible beings were scrutinizing your every move. If your goat fell ill, it wasn't bad luck. It was punishment. If your harvest failed, it wasn't the soil. It was your fault for not offering enough at the temple. And so the people offered. They offered grain, cattle, wine. And sometimes, in the most desperate times, they offered blood. Yes, human sacrifices, priests cloaked in elaborate robes, would read omens in the entrails of animals, searching for signs of favor or warning. A wrong reading could doom an entire city. A wrong move by a farmer, a craftsman, even a king, could be interpreted as an insult to the gods of chaos and punished accordingly. It wasn't faith, it was survival. Religious rituals dominated daily life. Festivals lasted for days, not in celebration, but in fear. Desperate attempts to appease furious deities like Enlil, Inanna, and Marduk. People didn't pray for blessings, they begged for mercy. And the temples, they weren't places of peace. They were powerhouses controlling land, wealth, and labor. To be out of favor with the priests was to be out of favor with the gods. And that was a risk few dared to take. Living in Mesopotamia meant living under constant, unrelenting anxiety. You weren't just surviving disease or famine. You were surviving the wrath of beings beyond comprehension, beings you couldn't see but who could destroy everything you knew in an instant. And as if gods, laws, and sickness weren't enough, there was another force lurking in the shadows, a force just as ancient, just as deadly, and far more violent. And it wasn't just the gods who could tear your world apart. If you thought the gods were cruel, you hadn't met your neighbors. Mesopotamia was never a place of peace. City fought city, kingdom fought kingdom. And it wasn't rare, it was constant. Water, land, pride? Any excuse would do. The fields that fed you one year could be the battlegrounds that buried you the next. Wars weren't fought by professional armies. No, they dragged farmers, potters, shepherds from their lives, and thrust spears into their hands. Men who had never left their villages suddenly found themselves marched hundreds of miles fighting for a king they'd never even seen. Victory was brutal. Cities were sacked, crops were burned, women were taken as slaves, children were ripped from their families. The losers weren't just defeated, they were erased. Babylon itself, the pride of Mesopotamia, once fell in a single night, the city walls crumbling, the temples looted, the people slaughtered or led away in chains. Assyria to the north perfected terror. They stacked the skulls of the fallen into towering monuments, grotesque warnings to any who might think to resist. It wasn't just the men who suffered. Women were dragged away, forced into slavery or worse. Elders who could no longer fight were killed outright. There was no Geneva Convention, no mercy, only the iron law of conquest. And you, the average person? You didn't get a choice. You could be plowing your field one day and bleeding in the dust the next, your home burning behind you. This was daily life. Violence wasn't the exception, it was the norm. You're still here, though, still listening. That means you're the kind of person who understands history isn't clean, it's ugly, brutal, and endlessly fascinating. So if you appreciate hearing the real stories, the ones they don't tell you in school, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We bring history to light every single week, the good, the bad, and the horrific. And believe it or not, there's still one final nightmare left, the one that even kings and queens couldn't escape. And it might just be the cruelest part of all. You might imagine that kings, priests, and nobles, those perched high above the chaos, lived lives of luxury and safety. But in Mesopotamia, even power was a fragile illusion. Kings ruled by the will of the gods, or so they claimed. But one bad harvest, one unexpected flood, one military defeat, and that divine favor could evaporate. Quickly, enemies lurked everywhere. Rivals at court, generals hungry for power, priests who claimed the gods had turned their backs on the throne. A king could go from godlike authority to dead in a ditch overnight. And life in the palace? It wasn't the opulent dream you might think. Walls built of mud brick, rooms dim, stuffy, and crowded. The royal family lived under constant surveillance. Queens and royal women were often confined to harems, gilded cages where trust was rare and betrayal was routine. Poison wasn't just a story from myths, it was real and it was common. A cup of wine, a plate of figs, anything could be your last meal if you trusted the wrong person. Bodyguards could be bribed, priests could turn their rituals against you, even your own children could be the end of you. Outside the palace walls, the people might starve. Inside, the powerful played their own dangerous games. There was no true peace, no real security. Not for the poor in their mud huts, not for the slaves in the fields, and not even for the kings in their crumbling palaces. Mesopotamia, the so-called cradle of civilization, was a nightmare for everyone. Progress came at a price, and that price was staggering. Disease, war, religious terror, legal brutality, social inequality, all baked into the first cities, the first societies. And in many ways, those ancient ghosts still linger today. If you found this glimpse into ancient Mesopotamia fascinating, you won't want to miss what we've got next. Click here for another story, one that might be even darker, even stranger, and even more revealing. So if you're ready for more hidden truths from the past, make sure to subscribe. You won't want to miss what's coming next.